Why is the Australia Institute so disappointed with this report when other think tanks like the Grattan Institute have broadly supported it?
Well, it's a roadmap without a destination. And we've been waiting for that destination, which is a long-term goal for years now. I mean, the government promised in 2017 that it would deliver a long-term strategy. And even this report, the technology roadmap, admits it was supposed to complement a long-term strategy that has been quietly delayed to next year. And what we have now is a technology roadmap that seems to promote many technologies that the government has been pushing for quite some time.
Yeah, it does have a focus on gas to complement renewables, including controversially carbon capture and storage. Why, in your view, is that not a good idea?
Well, I mean, the minister just said, let's be practical. So then why are we considering carbon capture and storage? The government's been promoting this since 2003, has spent over $1.3 billion in taxpayer money to try and make it work, and we don't have a single fully operational carbon capture and storage facility in the country. And yet now, in being practical, we're supposed to support carbon capture and storage again. Really, the only reason seems to be ideological, and that's to use it to support more gas and potentially more coal, when we know that gas and coal are part of the problem, not part of the solution when it comes to climate change.
You mentioned coal, but this report doesn't make any mention of new coal-fired power stations, so that must be a positive.
It certainly is, and it's a silver lining. It's only taken 20 years to figure out that coal is not part of a solution for climate change. But at the same time, if we look at the bigger picture, the energy minister still has a task force that's looking to keep Liddell Power Station open in New South Wales. He's still funding a scoping study in Queensland for a new coal-fired power station. And so we still have, in the bigger picture, a real problem when it comes to coal and when it comes to gas. And when it comes to gas in particular, it seems like we're allowing this fossil fuel to dominate the conversation, not just when it comes to climate change, but also in terms of our economic recovery from the pandemic. And we know that gas is probably the worst sector to invest in if we want to create jobs. We also know that gas is part of the problem around climate change.
We'll come to the economic recovery in a moment. I want to stick with coal for a minute. Do you think that some friction may appear within the coalition now, given that there are those prominent backbenchers who have been pushing for, as you say, a new coal-fired power station in Queensland?
Well, I mean, coal seems to be a serious problem for the coalition in that regard. And we know that some backbenchers are quite happy to speak up in support of it. We know the Prime Minister himself in previous years told the country not to be afraid of coal. And we know that there are a number of plans to basically increase Australia's coal exports. But the silver lining for this technology report, if we take it on its face value, is that coal doesn't have a role to play. So whether on one side the government is talking to its backbenchers and telling them to continue to press coal, but on the other looking at how we actually get to a climate target, we're not sure how both mesh up. But if there's one thing that is well understood by most people, it's that coal is part of the problem, not part of the solution.
There are reports coming out of China that Australia's coking coal exports to China could be under threat because of those growing trade tensions between the two countries in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. That should be a concern for Australia's economic recovery, shouldn't it?
Look, it's a concern because we don't want our largest trading partner just arbitrarily blocking our exports. But when it comes to the role of coal in our economy, it's often overstated. In fact, according to the Climate of the Nation report that the Australian Institute does regularly each year, Australians overestimate the income from the coal industry by a factor of 4 and the employment by a factor of 23. It doesn't play as large a role as we think it does. And if anything, this should only encourage us to diversify our exports further rather than rely on this quarry vision of how Australia should operate.
So is now the right time, given the hit to Australia's economy from the coronavirus pandemic, to be focusing on investment in renewable energy?
Well, I mean, renewable energy is the cheapest way that you can create new energy, and that's what the report says, as well as many of our energy agencies. But also, renewable energy employs 3 times more people than the coal and gas power jobs in this country. So it's actually the best way to create jobs if that's ultimately what you want to do. But it's not just myself talking about it. Look at the examples overseas. There are long-term strategies to net zero in New Zealand. in South Korea, in many European countries. So they're combining the economic stimulus with climate action, addressing one crisis, but also addressing the other alongside it. That's what a long-term strategy needs to do, and that's why it's so disappointing that we don't have one. Instead, we have this roadmap to nowhere.
Okay, Richie Mezian, good to talk to you tonight.